Alright guys, welcome back to F1 Drama. Red Bull have dominated the season so far and seem set to for the rest of this season and potentially the rest of all these regulations up until 2026 given the cost cap that is now in place. Formula 1 are not happy with these developments. They don't want the dominance to be the case. They want competition at the front of the grid. It's already started to hurt the viewership figures for this season so far. There's rumours circulating. They are trying to think about ways they can potentially slow down Red Bull and create changes to the regulations to allow other teams to catch up. Will this happen? What sort of backlash would there be? Should it happen? Those are the key questions of today. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. So 1-2 finishes back to back at the start of the season. There's been a few Williams, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull this year. Did that in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and you wouldn't bet against them to do it again in Australia and beyond. Such is the pace advantage in the race that they are presently enjoying. Now, speaking of Ferrari quickly, an update on them because we talked yesterday that they're looking at changing their concept from what they currently have to a Red Bull design. The issue for Ferrari is that there's problems with the cost cap in place. They have an entire plan this entire season of how they're going to develop their car, what new parts they're going to bring and when. They can't change tack like Mercedes can. Mercedes, it seems, weren't that confident in this car and therefore they left quite a lot of room on the table to make changes if necessary, which they are now going for. But Ferrari were more confident in this year's car and therefore are in a bit of a predicament. So it seems that to Michael Schmidt of Amos here that they're just not making the best use of the car because they're able to get good lap times in qualifying, but they just can't succeed in the race, it seems. It was the same problem last year, and the issue is only about the race. The drivers can never focus on quali and suddenly find themselves in front of a car they've never driven before, but despite that, Charles Leclerc still drives sensationally. At the moment, Ferrari isn't able to make a car equally strong in quali and the race. Even in races, there are performance differences depending on which set of tyres is used. They were bad on the hard in Jeddah, good on the soft tyre, for example. So some issues for Ferrari to solve, but it seems they haven't fully abandoned the idea of this car concept yet, and they are effectively forced to stick to it. They can't change like Mercedes are because they're eating up too much of their capacity for cost cap already. And, well, Schmidt goes on to say they would come into conflict with the budget cap because all of the development steps are already planned and are in production. Vasseur has already indicated that practically every single race, something new is coming. So, look, Ferrari are bringing new things every race. They may develop faster in the short term than Mercedes are, but if their concept simply isn't good enough to match Red Bull, then they're fighting for second at best here this season rather than trying to fight for more next season when they might have to change things anyway. So I think it's kind of been confirmed that Ferrari will not necessarily guaranteedly, if that's even a word, keep this concept for 24, but they are going to keep it for now. So everything up until the summer break is planned. Like Ferrari have already spent that money, they're already developing the parts, already got some in production, and that means that maybe they will improve a fair bit over the next few races, but it might never be enough to catch Red Bull, and they are compromising next season potentially if these updates don't massively work. So as it seems right now, to get a race winner other than Red Bull, it's going to take some, well, collapse from the Red Bull side, either reliability from Red Bull or, various dramas in the race, like Verstappen running over debris as he did last year at Silverstone and ending up finishing in 7th place. Alonso believes there will be a time where they won't finish 1-2 and he will be able to get a victory, but that may not happen anytime soon. And it all comes back to some of the regulation changes we saw last year. The Technical Directive 39 that came in to try and stop the porpoising. It was believed that Red Bull might suffer because of that. Turns out they've benefited. Ferrari really are the team that got hit hard by that Technical Directive. But also, as a result of the regulations changing this season and the floor being raised, the floor now generates less downforce than it did before. Therefore, teams have been smashing on everything they can to the car to increase the downforce it generates, from the winglets to other wings, just doing everything they can to increase the downforce lost by the raising of the floor. Now, the result of this is that because less downforce is generated by the floor and more by the wings, the dirty air is now increasing. This was likely inevitable anyway, as teams packed on more downforce anyway for this season. They probably would have done that in addition if the floors hadn't even been changed, but it does mean that Sainz, as we saw the other day, was getting reminded of 2021 cars by the fact that it's more challenging to follow, and F1 and the FIA are alarmed by this. And this is what I think is very interesting about the state of Formula 1 today. This is maybe the first year of real dominance and predictability in the last several seasons since Drive to Survive has become a thing and Formula 1 has massively grown. 2021 was mega. Obviously, even last year we had some phenomenal races at the start and the middle of the season. This year the races have been been 3-star at best, maybe 2-star. Last year, I think we had a lot of 4-star races, especially early on, even better than that. Silverstone, Brazil, towards the end were also fantastic. But, maybe we'll get more this season. We probably will. But in general, it's probably going to be a less entertaining season, and we might have less passes because Dirty Air is back with a vengeance. And as Amos go on to say, the new floor rule is possibly an open goal. The rule removes the point to where the bouncing begins, but it also has encouraged engineers to add all sorts of slots and wings to the floor edges to minimize the downforce loss. If the trend continues and the drivers continue to complain, the FIA could take corrective action. The easiest way to achieve this would be to extend the DRS zones, which is, it's funny really, because they're actually shortening a lot of the DRS zones at many of the circuits this year, because last year it was too easy to overtake, but actually it now may be getting harder and harder again. The drivers, Leclerc, Sainz, I think even Verstappen made comment on it back at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, so that's one side of the discussion. The other part is that Red Bull are dominating right now, and there is discussions about a potential intervention in the regulation, because look, we've seen this before. It's always a discussion that comes up. Whenever a team is dominating, other teams inevitably start to ask the question, well, this isn't good for the sport, we've got to find a way to at least level the playing field to some degree. And this is the issue in a way with the budget cap, that Mercedes and Ferrari can't just pump $500 million into catching up with Red Bull. They have to do it over years, which means they may never catch up to Red Bull. The team that gets the head start in the regulations may just maintain that for the entirety until the regulations change. And that maybe is an unintended consequence of the budget cap era we're now in. That a dominant team is potentially even more likely to remain as such, even though there are some other factors such as development time and testing time and things that do work in the other team's favour, but that maybe isn't as big of an advantage as some people want to believe that it is. So let me just go on to say, the issue with doing something to prevent Red Bull dominating is the justification, right? Which obviously is understandable. They want to improve the battles, but as long as there's no safety risk, it's difficult to change the rules. So maybe there's a way that F1 are thinking, okay, because nowadays, as I say, Liberty Media, they are obviously enamored by the way the sport has developed over the last few years, the growth of the sport. They don't want the numbers to start dropping off because, that's just how it works. Yes, these periods of dominance establish legends of the sport. The Sennas, the Schumachers, the Hamiltons, they wouldn't be as, legendary as they are without these periods of, at times, sometimes it's boring, but at other times, it does create legacies, and you're seeing greatness in action at times from not just drivers, but also from teams. That's the interesting thing about Formula One being a Constructors' Championship at the end of the day and having this level of competition. But at the same time, Formula One, the ownership, definitely now, probably more than ever, want to ensure the spectacle is maintained. That's, a lot of the reason why we think maybe the events of Abu Dhabi occurred as they did, because they wanted the spectacle. They wanted the last lap showdown. And are they going to be happy with Red Bull just dominating week in and week out? Probably not. Now, can they justify a change that's going to slow down Red Bull? And even what do you do to try and slow down Red Bull is tough anyway, but maybe there's a way that they can say, okay, these cars aren't following as easily as they were before. Let's change X, let's change Y that Red Bull happen to be particularly good at to try and prevent that, and therefore we can maybe do something. I don't know. I guess we'll see about this, but it's always a conversation. Horner said for years, this is even back in 2015, I found this tweet, that he was talking about that, we've got to find a way to stop Mercedes. And it's funny, the comment at the time, Horner, from a team that dominated F1 for 4 years, wants the FIA to stop Mercedes domination because, he was saying at the time, we've got to find a way to stop Mercedes. They're too good and all this. And you can understand why. And now Red Bull are back to dominating. Other teams are probably sooner or later going to say a similar thing. Now, there have been some noticeable declines in viewership here. This is in Sky Germany. And I know there's potentially other factors at play for Sky Germany just because I don't think their coverage is particularly well liked in the first place. But in fairness, the numbers compared to last year in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia especially have gone down quite significantly from 2022, which wouldn't be surprising if that's a trend across the board this season, where the season just isn't as entertaining as it has been previously. So there have been changes. There's been plenty more changes in just addition to the 3 that Aldas mentions here, but there's been some changes that have been made over time to try and, change the regulations to stop the dominant team, and maybe it's going to happen again. I guess they're weighing up the possibilities, weighing up if they can get away with it, if they want to get away with it. But I know some people believe that Liberty Media were involved in the events of Abu Dhabi to maximize the spectacle. It wouldn't be amiss really to suggest that the FIA and Formula One want to come together and find a way to try and slow Red Bull down and bring the rest of the team back to them, based on how important the spectacle and the entertainment value has increased in importance, I guess you could argue, over the past couple of years. is, especially since the Drive to Survive era. So definitely tweet your thoughts in the comments below. But right now, it's not looking good for their competition. Charles Leclerc, for example, in all the years he's started in a Formula 1 season since he joined Ferrari, this is his worst start by a mile. 22, 21, 20, and even 19. And 2020, of course, with that terrible car they had, he had way more points on the board than he's had after 2 races this year. So not good for him. And of course, Mercedes are saying, well, we might just have to copy the Red Bull. And if we do, we'll put a little bull somewhere on it. But, you know, maybe that won't be necessary if regulation changes happen. But I don't really imagine they're going to be happening any time soon. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.